The Ready Set Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of the Ready Set Grow podcast. We're really excited to have a chat about regenerative agriculture with Jason Bradley from Olds College. Hi, Jason.
Hey, good.
And Daryl Chubb, who's an independent agronomist. Hi, Daryl. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
And as always, we have the spectacular Diana Laturnis from Saskatchewan on to help me host and ask questions. So Jason, for people that don't know you, can you tell a little bit about yourself and Olds College and kind of frame this thing up for people that aren't familiar with you yet?
Sure. So I like to kind of give the three stages of my career, and it helps people understand where I've come from, where I'm at. So the first stage of my career, I spent 10 years at Nortel Networks, which at the time was Canada's largest telecommunications company, but also had the largest share of the Toronto Stock Exchange at one point. And before it imploded, that's where it was. So yeah, I was involved in manufacturing management and senior project manager, a new product introduction. So that was my sort of upbringing, my professional upbringing in technology. And at the end of my 10th year there, I had an opportunity to fulfill a boyhood dream. And a good friend of mine and his family had bought a large cattle ranch, and they were non-resident owners. And I visited it, and I said to him one day, well, if you ever need a ranch manager, let me know. And about a year later, he called me up and he said, hey, things have changed. And did you mean that when you said it? And I'm like, yeah, I think I was serious about that. So I left my career at Nortel and took my wife and my two young kids to manage the Red Deer River Ranch, the Bar 75, 50,000 acre, 300 head grazing operation on the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains. Lived in a red log house. Our closest neighbor was across the river and commuted to work a horseback when he came to work for me. So I made a little bit of a pivot there, did that for 20 years and learned, I lived by the 4-H model, learned to do by doing. On an outfit that size, having honestly never officially calved a cow out on my own before. And I just, that it was part of my DNA, and I had this great privilege to be able to learn about livestock production. And the last two years of my time there, just recently, was I really started to look at things as a system and understood the value of looking at how the land and livestock work together, and built an adaptive multi-paddock grazing system and a gravity-fed water system and created this grazing system there. So we can talk about that more later. And then the third sort of stage of my career, I've spent the last few years at Olds College as an instructor briefly, and then I spent a couple of years as the director for Smart Ag, helping to stand up the Olds College Smart Farm. And I look after, right now, I manage all of our partnerships with corporate partners, and had a little time this summer, thanks to COVID, or no thanks, with some layoff time. So I went and did some work at Creative Destruction Lab and helped them with their ag stream. And so that's kind of who I am, where I'm at.
Awesome. Yeah, Daryl, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am living just northeast of Calgary, about an hour northeast at Irricana, and my main business right now is ag consulting. I focus on all parts agriculture. Cropping would still be my forte, but regenerative agriculture is a large portion of that discussion with my clients. My roots come from Saskatchewan as well, so I'm an export out of Saskatchewan back in the early 2000s after university, where I worked some ag retail and then spent the better part of 10 years managing a grain farm. That's how I got to where I'm at. Size was, we got it up to fairly large for the area, plus a large feedlot. So grain and livestock and manure management were a large part of the discussion. Once I left there in 2012, I started consulting on the cropping side. And then in 2014, through some good friends and mentorship, I did my Nuffield scholarship, which just was a complete pivot. Jason used that word. It was a pivot for me personally, professionally, within my life, and started looking at agriculture a lot different. Went into it with a synthetic viewpoint, all about yield, push. But the question I was asking on my Nuffield was, should we be able to do more with what we were doing with? So could we be doing more with less, or producing more with what we're doing? And specifically around fertility and fungicides and such. So through that process, met a lot of different people, kind of took a curve in the road and found regenerative agriculture, and it just made sense. So to date, that is a large portion of my consulting and the discussion. Personally, we've bought a quarter of land, so we run a handful of cows. So I'm also practicing and learning what I'm talking about, primarily on the cattle and the grazing side, but we're also implementing covers and cover crops and annuals, and looking at the discussion around what type of cow we want. So it all kind of fits together. So, yeah.
Wonderful story. Congrats on the Nuffield scholarship. That's terrific. A terrific program. Jason, do you want to talk to us a little bit and just define what regenerative agriculture is from your perspective?
Yeah, and it's my perspective. We each need to have our own, but I'll refer to the 6 core principles that I think lots of folks are saying it's what defines it. And what it's not a dogma. It's not an ideal. It's not a right versus wrong thing. It's really an and or proposition, but it's a practice. The way that I see it, it's a practice. It's a different way to look at things and do things. So the 6 core principles as defined are, first of all, understanding the context of your farming operation. So that means you need to figure out a way to step back and kind of almost like watch yourself in your operation, like to be able to have that perspective of understanding what it is you're doing. And it can be, vegetables, could be fruit. Lots of people apply this in gardening. It can be conventional arable land and or livestock, but understanding that context is important. And then minimizing soil disturbance. So it's not just about no-till. No-till is certainly a part of it, but there is no rules to say thou shalt no-till, but minimizing as much as possible soil disturbance is key. Maximizing crop diversity. So again, it's not about anti-monoculture, but it's about understanding how to maximize the diversity of crops, whatever they are. Intercropping, cover crops, those types of things are really important to the practice. Keeping the soil covered as much as possible throughout the year in whatever way that you choose to do that. But that's one of the tenets of the practice that's really key. Maintaining a living root year round. People in lots of parts of Canada look at you like you have 3 heads when you say that. Pardon me, but it's not impossible. There are ways to really, as you sort of get outside your own box, to think about how could I keep a living root in the ground year round in one way or the other, and then integrating livestock. So those are the 6 core principles that define the practice. And then it's about how you understand those and how you apply them and continually adjust and iterate those.
Interesting stuff. I'm wondering, Daryl, what are some of the advantages that drew you to regenerative ag?
Well, I think part of it was a new challenge. One thing that I was finding within my business is things were getting very repetitive. Sure, we have genetics and technology, but the options are somewhat capped. So it was a complete different way of implementing different uses, different technologies as well. And Jason started talking off about the context, the viewpoint. I look at it as a holistic view as well. I was questioning, what do I want as well? So what drew me to it was just, it was a challenge. It was something new. It wasn't mainstream.
So some of these sustainability practices and techniques, they kind of are evolving all the time, and a lot of times they're wrapped in improving the environment and climate change. Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think it's important for farmers to hear that, it's not an either or. It's yes, we want sustainable economic activity, but you can also, improve some of these other characteristics.
Yeah, it is an and or proposition for sure. And I'd like to talk often about the three-legged stool. So profitability, productivity, often sustainability is what's named as the third one. It can be called, addressing climate change, or it can be called looking at the environment. But whatever sustainability is, so there's those three. To me, regenerative ag, like all ag, should be focusing on the profitability. Not that the others aren't important, but we're all running a business, and so that should never stop any of us from focusing on profitability. Because if you're doing things in a sustainable fashion, and if you're looking at productivity and yield, and you're addressing all those at the same time, that's actually a really healthy place to come from. So regenerative ag, yes, it addresses some of those other sort of challenges, things like, improving carbon cycling and getting it from the air into the soil, and addressing environmental concerns, and things like 4R nutrient management, or all those types of things, which are really important. But it's about achieving more profitability, because we all need to do that to run our businesses and to be successful. So I like to remind myself, and maybe challenge others to say, there's so much potential as we start to understand the synergy of how things work together, how different plants work together in multi-variety instances, and how livestock and plants work together. There's so much value to be leveraged out of that, that drives profitability, that will help to increase yields. And oh, by the way, it'll help to improve soil health. And I think if I was to wrap it all up, to me, it's about soil health, because everything comes back to soil, and the apex of soil, of life, is carbon. And so I'd like to draw that back and say that, that's where the focus should be. And what I've seen from others that are practitioners of regenerative ag is they tend to be highly profitable, because they're reducing things on the input side and achieving or even increasing yield, but doing it within this nature-based system.
Jason, a question for you. How soon do you become profitable by changing these practices? Is it right away, or is it, several years down the road? Can you give a little bit of context around that?
It depends. It depends. It depends on where you start from. It depends on at what, if you're starting with 10 acres in one field, or if you're willing to be a bit more risk accepting and to do something larger. It takes time, like anything in agriculture, that we have one growing season to work with. It's certainly not like instantaneous. And I think I'd really like to get Daryl to jump in on this, but it's not instantaneous. But anything else we're doing in agriculture, whether it's organic or conventional or regenerative or whatever else you want to talk about, but I kind of have the 3 to 5 year time frame in my mind where you really start to see the impact of things in the land, and you start to see the impact of things on your bottom line. Daryl, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It totally depends. I think everyone's going to have challenges based on freight and logistics and people and time. But the key is to start small, make small changes, because you go and change. It's a business. It's you have to be profitable, otherwise, farming is going to crash. So I like looking at a mixed farm, grain and livestock intertwined. Now all of a sudden you can actually get some production, some profitability out of including diversity and cover crops and different things. Whereas a straight grain guy might have challenges doing that, especially in Western Canada. Now, as you get into other parts of North America and the world, that's different. But if we talk locally, that's a challenge. And then the next thing is just the change in mindset as well. Before it all starts, it's a change in mindset and trying to figure out what's going to work for you, what your current management system is. So how long? There is no definite answer, but it does have to start paying relatively quick time. It's just how can we extract maybe a little bit more production or I think it's land utilization is part of it as well.
This is probably for Jason. For us to bring some of these changes forward, we need to leverage the resources of the whole agricultural industry. And, a lot of times we all swim in our lanes, right? I'm a seed company, I'm a fertilizer company, I'm crop protection, whatever. How, Jason, can the ag industry get engaged, help support the improvement, the evolution of our farming practices, using some of these more sustainable and regenerative techniques in your mind?
I think there's sort of two things that come to mind right away for the ag industry, if we want to call it that. And first of all is to start to look into something like regenerative ag or conservation agriculture or whatever you want to call it, but to really start to understand what the opportunities are. So it's a bit of an education thing, because once you start to understand how that practice or system works, whether you're an ag equipment manufacturer, a retailer, an input provider, an agronomist, once you start to allow yourself to think outside your own box and not swim in your lane, swim in somebody else's lane, swim with them in their lane, swim the other way in the same lane that they're swimming. Just allow yourself to get out of that box and challenge yourself. Daryl talked about mindset, and I think that's the second thing is be open-minded and willing to listen, to think about, well, maybe there is another way to produce food, whatever crop that might be. So I think those two things from the industry point of view, because once folks start doing that, then they're going to see either some of their current solutions are going to fit in a different practice, or maybe they're going to start trying to design things that fit as well. So I don't think it has to be, for an input supplier, well, we're going to change over to be a regenerative ag input supplier.
Well, they won't without, help. And I think that's where, organizations like Olds need to demonstrate and show and force those collisions, right? Because, everybody's busy, especially in this time of COVID, and some of that innovation needs a nudge in my experience. So
needs a nudge.
I think your role and your leadership in this could be a fairly important factor in, the more rapid adoption.
I totally agree. And we need a nudge, but we also need a place to look over the fence at our neighbors. Because in farming, we like to be first to be second. Mm-hmm. You like to sit at the coffee shop and see what somebody else did. I think we need to get a lot better.
Well, mistakes are expensive, right?
Okay.
We've all done those.
So
I'd rather Jason experiment than I'll experiment once you've proven it that it works.
Exactly, right? So, but Daryl's point was start small, right? And so Old College can do that. We can start small for you. So even a year and a half ago, there was 2/4 of land, 320 acres donated to the college by a family's estate. And I looked at that and I said, this is going to be our regenerative ag demonstration. So we're actually building a demonstration capacity, entity that we're doing different applied research on with, virtual fencing with using GPS and cattle on part of it, and different cover crops and crop cocktails, and we can run it like it, as if it's its own entity, but we can also test things out within that.
Daryl, can you give us some suggestions for what producers can do just to start small, if you were them?
Yeah, so there are many options. First and foremost is starting from the below ground, working your way up. So, I mean, the conversation is what comes first, healthy soil or healthy plants? And it's both. So making sure that you have a good soil test is, that's what most agronomists and most people in the industry will say. But what does good mean? It means that having the right information based on your goals. So I guess I should back up. As a producer, you need a goal. You need some goals in mind. You need a path forward. Otherwise, you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and you don't know which way you're going. And that gets expensive, right? So you can't afford mistakes. And then the next thing is just, there's lots of resources out there, education, looking at some of these associations and colleges, looking at some of the research that's out there. And then the next thing is talk to neighbors, maybe not even neighbors, just find support people. There's many different groups out there that are doing this stuff to help keep you motivated, help keep you moving forward. So getting that focus first, and then step into getting looking at your soil. What's your goal? What's your limiting factor? What tools do you have? What's your management regime? So, what I talk about with guys and people is not going out to spend a couple $100,000 on a different drill or this or that. It's about, let's see how we can work with the tools that you do have. So it could be as easy as cropping rotations, as easy as rotational grazing. To some people that sounds very complicated, but when you step back and look at it, some of the biggest changes can be some of the smallest steps.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Can I just add to that? So I don't want to talk about me very much at all, but I'm just thinking of the example that I have is my own at the Red Deer River Ranch. About Daryl talked about, asking lots of questions, making those small changes. I spent the better part of a fall and a winter and a spring thinking through how I wanted to create my adaptive multi-paddock grazing system, including curvilinear fencing and a water system. But I asked our Forge Association, our county ag extension guys, our Alberta Ag experts in different areas, the different companies I was working with. And I created a plan, but I sort of included them as my team, and I bounced things off of them and got them to, say what would or wouldn't work. I tried to keep it within Daryl's point of what did I already have, but it was going to require some investment. So there's programs out there as well. So, it was a $42,000 project altogether. I think it cost the ranch about $6,000 cash. The other 36 was from grants from county, from the province, and from the federal government, right? So was able to get all that sort of covered. So that's an example of how you can get started.
Well, and along that line, getting started, you just articulated your approach. Where are the information sources? I'm interested. I'm farming. Where do I go? Are there books? Are there websites? Are there movies, videos? I don't know. Do I just Google regenerative ag and hope I find who are the experts? Where would I go?
Well, I think the options are endless, right from books. Depends on how you learn the best, but lots of stuff on YouTube, and you figure out who is the experts. There are many out there. A lot of them do have, there's a lot of conferences on YouTube. Great place to start. If you're love books and like reading instead, yeah, the options are endless.
I wrote some of them down so I didn't miss them, but I very purposefully have this book and I leave it there all the time. So Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown. Leave it there because it reminds me, I can see it in my screen, but all the time I get people that don't know really very much at all about farming or regenerative, like, what's that book about? So Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown. I also, Growing a Revolution, Bringing Our Soil Back to Life by David Montgomery is a great resource. I think there's some innovation type of learning that's important for producers, because producers typically are innovators, but understanding how innovation can work or different ways to look at it. So the Lean Startup by Ries is a great sort of approach to, from a farming point of view. It tends to be applied in tech, and lots of the ag tech companies probably go through the Lean Startup approach, but it allows you to understand what it is to have the build, measure, learn feedback loop, and that it's okay to fail, but fail fast. There's the Rodale Institute. They just came out with a great white paper, the Regenerative Agriculture and the Carbon Solution. I think there's in terms of movies, Farmer's Footprint is one that's 20 minutes and it gives you a really good perspective. Kiss the Ground just came out. It's a documentary, but I think it's really worth the watch. Biggest Little Farm. It's a bit of a story, but it's still something that they actually did. And then the Regenerative Ag podcast by John Kempf. If you're looking for a place to go, go and find John Kempf and listen to his podcast. It's just huge value.
Yeah, I would say that if you're going to start with any podcast, that is the one as well.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, and I saw a video a couple of weeks ago with Greg Patterson from A&L Labs. They've launched a new Vitalis soil health test. So they're trying to get a handle on the biological component in the soil. So great advice, guys. And we'll try to get that list and attach it to the podcast here as well.
And Daryl, if there was something that you wanted to tell the next generation that's just starting out with farming and they have a clean slate, what would be your recommendations?
Yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday, but so two things. Might sound a little bit of a conflict, but first of all, never forget experience from the older generations. I mean, that's invaluable, right? From your grandfather to father. They've gone through stuff, things have changed, so never throw that out the window. However, things are always changing. I look at some clients and some different situations as well, and if you're going to farm like dad did or like grandpa did, systems have changed. Thoughts have changed, markets have changed, consumers have changed. So you really got to sit back and look at what do you want to do and what is going on, and do you have any problems there. Within my Nuffield travels, I was in Western Australia, and I forget the gentleman's name, but basically it revolved around weed resistance. He's kind of the king on weed resistance in Australia. And the message I got from that is repetition is dangerous. We always have to disrupt the system. So that would be my advice right off the bat, is do something different, create a different system. By system, I'm talking right from management to biological to ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, farming, ranching, production is an ecosystem.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on today. If people are interested in getting a hold of you, how would they do that, Jason and Daryl? Yeah,
for me, the easiest way is probably LinkedIn, right? You can just find me on LinkedIn, and we're all most accessible there, and I check it often, and you can message me there, and then I can get back to you and we can start a conversation.
Perfect. And Daryl, do you have a website or how we can hunt you down?
I am on LinkedIn as well. Maybe not, I'm not that active on it, but I do check it periodically. And I do have a website, yes. My company is DeNovo Ag. So DENOVO Ag, AG. So my website is DeNovoAg.com.
Ag.com. Perfect. Well, we'll add that link into this. So any other questions, Diana?
Oh, I think this is great. I think it gives a lot of resources and information of where to start, and it gives people some ideas about what it is, because it's the talk these days. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming on to the podcast and letting us know about this stuff.
Yeah, terrific. We really enjoyed having you on. Just want to thank all our viewers to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. If you like this show, you can see the other ones on YouTube. Just type in Ready, Set, Grow podcast in the search and you'll find them. Or you can go to the rhaccelerator.com website and just click on the blog link, and we've been posting most of them up there. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.